name is Ian Harfield. I'm a solution engineer at TIBCO, and I also manage the TIBCO Global SAP program. With us today, we have Pedro Farina from Apgar Consulting and Kevin Duffy, also from TIBCO. Pedro, Kevin, perhaps you could take a moment to introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Pedro Farina. I've got 20 years experience working in IT, especially in the areas of data and analytics within global multinationals, specifically in the areas of FMCG and life sciences. And all the time, it was global companies with a very strong SAP backbone. Thanks, Ian, for the invite.
And Kevin Duffy here. I am currently at TIBCO with Ian. I have about 6 years of experience working with SAP systems and also focused within data management. I spent about 4 years doing consulting work, professional services, helping companies move from ECC to S4 HANA. Also worked with various other SAP systems such as MDG and a few others as well. Currently at TIBCO, as I mentioned, been here about 2 years. I really focus on our data management solutions, one of them being our master data management solution. And then also I work with Ian on our SAP go-to-market practice and help lead that for North America.
Thanks. So the topic of the session today is master data management. Increasingly, we are seeing organizations adopting master data management to ensure the integrity of their business processes, enabling faster and smarter decisions, and the monetization of their data across a heterogeneous landscape. Perhaps we can start with each of you explaining some of the data management challenges you see organizations facing today. Pedro, perhaps you could start.
Thanks, Ian. I think probably the one that most people can relate to is the proliferation of data silos. So what companies increasingly find is that they have the data spread across a number of different places. Very often the same kind of data repeated in those different data silos. And that leads necessarily to inconsistent data. What you'll find very often is you have the same list of countries managed separately in different places, and maybe not necessarily exactly the same lists of values within those countries. And then making that data interoperate and compare data from different places makes it much harder. The third big issue is around data availability, because very often those people who need the data do not know what data is available, cannot find the data, and very often end up creating their own version of that data. And finally, one of the big pressures we see increasingly is outside pressures. Pressures around need for increasing compliance needs, around increasing regulatory needs for data privacy, for example, for manufacturing of sensitive products. Financial requirements are also increasing very much. So those are the 4 key challenges that I increasingly see within the market.
Yeah, and Pedro, if I can just maybe add on a few more points of some things I've seen as well in the challenges within master data management space. So starting with maybe the proliferation of data silos. So you might see organizations or big Fortune 500 companies, they used to be on these mainframe systems, and then they implemented SAP ECC, right? And then now we're looking at SAP S4, an upgrade of your ERP environment. You might have a CRM in place, right? You might have Workday HR systems. All these different systems contain a lot of the same types of data and same maybe even objects. So when we're talking about master data, we're talking about customers, products, your suppliers, all these different things that you interact with as an organization often exist across all these different systems. Now, when we're maintaining this data in different systems, all these different users and people that are looking at the data might have different versions of it. So one of the big challenges that people are trying to solve for today is bringing all those different things or objects together into one area and be able to have a good version to be able to rely on and report on. So for instance, if you have a customer in your CRM, customer in your ERP, a customer in your legacy ERP, this all needs to be consistent and have the same maybe address on that customer record. So that's a big challenge that it's really difficult when you have lots of different structures and of these different entities across your different systems and making sure that all syncs up. Another example is without being able to have, on the inconsistent data piece, right? So in order to be able to have consistent data and complete data and accurate data, we need to make sure that you're performing some sort of validation check. So without these validation checks, what happens is maybe a customer record within the system doesn't have the right address. So you're sending your maybe products to an incorrect location or sending an invoice to the wrong location. Things like this can actually really result in direct, costs to the company. If you're not sending these objects to the right, or your products to the right location, then you're paying for additional shipping costs. So you can see there's lots of different issues without having accurate data across your organization that really directly affect the additional costs, or you can also lose out on profits. One last example I'll mention is lots of times you have maybe different databases per different lines of business, right? So maybe you acquired a new line of business, and to be able to really see one of these records, maybe a customer, for example, again, being able to see that their data shared across these different databases and maybe how they're interacting with that customer on one line of business, and not being able to see how they're interacting with that customer in another line of business. Now you're losing out on maybe aggravating that individual, or you're maybe not able to find upsell opportunities and things like that. So that's really a lot of the key areas that I see people trying to solve for within the master data management space.
Okay, so thanks, Pedro. Kevin, it's some great points for everybody to be thinking about, and great points that you've raised. If we think about considering an organization's heterogeneous landscape, and the global disruptions that we are seeing these days, how are they making data available for faster and more accurate decisions? Pedro, perhaps you could talk about some of the technologies that you're seeing organizations leveraging to address these challenges.
Sure, Ian, and there's a number of category of data management technologies that people have been implementing over the years. The critical ones around, of course, storing the data platform where you store the data, you make the data available to the solutions in the company which need that data, the integration technologies which ensure that the data is being transferred either physically or virtually to those who need it. Mm-hmm. But foundational to the data management strategy is the implementation of master data management and metadata management technologies. Master data, as Kevin was saying, it's really about ensuring that the critical enterprise data entities, the products, the customers, the suppliers, they are uniquely identifiable and they are reusable across the data ecosystem. Whereas metadata management technologies, which are increasingly as well being adopted because they really ensure that the organization can effectively govern their data. They can ensure that the data is findable, that the data is accessible to those who need it.
Sure. Okay, so I heard several technologies there, Pedro. Things like data integration, data accessibility, master and metadata management, virtualization, governance, etc. These are all very valid technologies, and perhaps we could make this the topic of a future session. But getting back to the master data management, Kevin, in your experience, is master data management specifically how is master data management specifically helping with faster and smarter decisions?
Right. So once you see an organization implement a master data management strategy, lots of times we really bucket the benefits that they realize in 3 different categories. So as you can see here, we have operational use cases, analytical use cases, and compliance. So I want to start with the operational space. As you might know, maybe there's maybe a customer operations team, right? And they need to be able to access this data. Maybe they need to look in different systems. So without it being consistent, they're not sure what to rely on, right? So we need to make sure that, as we mentioned previously, that all your information is consistent so that you're not making your employees maybe look across different systems and really spend additional time doing those types of processes. Something I kind of mentioned previously as well is these validations and standardizations of your data. What that means is we want to validate that the information that might be manually entered is correct, and not allowing someone to enter data that does not go along with the different rules that have been set up for your organization's data entry standpoint, right? So same thing with standardization. When I talk about standardization, what comes up a lot is maybe address data. So there's different standardization tools that can be used to really make sure that whenever you enter an address, for instance, that the zip code is formatted correctly per that region or something along those lines. So these are all types of things that we will do within a master data management strategy to help you from an operational standpoint. Just to hit on the other two real quickly, also compliance, right? So within master data management, you generally will utilize workflows to really help you enforce a governed process. So this really will allow you to collaborate and make sure that the right people are owning the right data and updating the right data. And when I say data, that means whether it's the right record or whether it's the right field or piece of that record. Lots of times different groups should be responsible for different parts of that data. So we want to make sure that this process is all tracked and there's a history that you can go back and look at to make sure that it's all auditable. And then lastly on the analytics piece, right? So without having a true trusted set of data, you're not going to be able to make real good business decisions. Without, if your customer data is all over the place, how are you going to be able to report on accurate pipeline and things like that? So this is really the three different buckets where we see being able to draw a lot of different use cases of benefits that are realized within MDM.
Okay, so I think one of my key takeaways from that was the importance of achieving a consistent golden record, Kevin. Is there, to achieve that, is there like one way to do this, or are there multiple ways of achieving such a trusted record? I'm asking this because I'm thinking that there are multiple audiences, there are multiple use cases, such as silos, mergers, acquisitions, driving data consistency across line of business. How does one go about deploying master data management to solve so many different scenarios?
Right, so that's a good point. So, every organization is different. Everyone has their different processes, different strategies on how they're trying to drive profits, reduce costs, right? So Gartner has deemed 4 different implementation styles for MDM. As you can see here, we have a consolidation use case, registry use case, centralized use case, and coexistence use case. So I want to talk a little bit about each and the different benefits that you might see from going about one of these different styles. So firstly, starting with consolidation. This is probably the least intrusive, but you might be able to realize benefits pretty quickly. It's probably one of the most common use cases whenever what you're trying to do here is bring all your different system data together. So if you have, like I mentioned earlier, multiple different systems with the same data, you want to be able to combine that data in a way that is, I guess, a good way to make sense of it so that it's unified across all these different systems, and you have the right information that's shared across all these systems so that you can then report out on it. So this is really a lot of times helping you with your BI analytics process. Another one's a centralization use case, right? So this is when you're bringing MDM to the front of the process and using that MDM platform to be able to maintain all those downstream systems. So if you have, again, using that customer example, you'll be maintaining that customer record within MDM, having that governed process, and then being able to feed that data down to those downstream systems. Another one is coexistence. So this is kind of a combination of the last two I just mentioned. So this is really where most organizations drive to be. So you realize benefits of both of the different system models that I mentioned, but are able to really support this shared service type of process throughout your organization, so that maybe if some different individuals need to still operate in those other source systems, they can still do that, and all this data will sync up across all your systems. Lastly, the registry is probably the least intrusive, where all you're trying to do here is basically link up the different indexes or IDs of the records across all your systems by using an MDM platform to do that, so you're able to really report out on it.
Okay, I can see. I can see there's multiple master data management implementations, and they're all focusing on a different type of situation solution. Is there like one pattern that's more popular than the others, or is there a case where the multiple patterns need to be deployed concurrently to support an MDM master data management journey? Pedro, in your broad experience here, what have you seen?
Well, as Kevin was saying, it does depend on the situation, but it certainly happens very often that multiple implementation patterns coexist within the same organization, and they can, for example, coexist and have different styles for different data entities. You can have an enterprise being able to manage their product information, for example, in a centralized approach with a central MDM solution, which is responsible for the life cycle of the product management from the creation to its update and deletion. And then that central MDM solution distributes the product information for all enterprise systems. This may be possible for product, but maybe for customer it's not. Maybe for customer you have that customer data being acquired from multiple sources, from your ERP, from your CRM, maybe from external data sources where you are actually acquiring this data as well. And in that case, probably a coexistence model may be more appropriate for this particular customer's master data requirements. It might also be a situation whereby you may want to start with one implementation style and over time migrate to another implementation style. It might be that, to Kevin's point, you may have a big analytics program, which is one of the use cases we spoke about earlier, which urgently needs that consolidated view of your master data. So you start with a consolidation style, a consolidation implementation style, and over time, you then start migrating to a more centralized style, which ensures that you have maybe better data quality and data governance, and may satisfy the compliance use case we are talking about, where you really need to control the data that you are generating.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. That's really informative stuff there. So my takeaway here, if I've understood it correctly, is that there is a need for a continuous need for a flexible master data management approach supporting multiple implementation styles, and this is reasonably crucial. I think this might be a good segue to think about SAP and the S/4HANA migration. So, Kevin, in your experience, how can these patterns be used in the context of an SAP transformation journey?
Right. So that's a good point. So we can use an MDM platform to do a lot of different things, beyond just a typical use case that we kind of just talked through. But so I want to take a step back and really talk through this whole S4 transformation that a lot of companies are going through right now, since there's a deadline to move to S4 by 2027, right? So anyone that's still using ECC, they're no longer going to be supported by SAP anymore. So when you do that, you can also capitalize on a lot of business opportunities, since you're moving to a new system that's going to be used for the foreseeable future. We want to make sure all that data that you move over to that new system is of good quality, so that you can do some of these things that we just talked about, right? So if you have duplicate customer records today that are making it more difficult for a lot of your processes, let's try to deduplicate all of this data. Let's try to also cleanse and standardize all your data, so that when we do move it over to S4, that it's of good quality, right? Also, one other thing to mention is there's a new domain within S4 that's known as business partner that we could go into a whole nother conversation about, that makes things a little bit more tricky for a conversion for your customer and supplier data, since they're converting to this new domain. So there's a lot of things we got to think about. And what I'm going to get into here for a minute is this strategy or thought process of using an MDM platform to consolidate, deduplicate, and standardize all that data before you move it over to S4 within this platform, so that then you can transition it into this business partner record when you move to S4. And then maybe you don't want to, there's a lot of different kind of ways to do this. And so a lot of people have trouble doing some of those things I just mentioned in their source systems and ECC today, because there's a lot of downstream impacts, a lot of impacts on the business. So we could use this new MDM platform to do that and start maintaining the data and implement this new process as part of your migration. And then after your migration, we can kind of switch some of these different interfaces that we create to then go about a different, after go live implementation style that we just mentioned, like that centralization one, where what we would basically do is start actually just maintaining all that data within your MDM platform and feed it to those downstream systems such as ECC and S4. So what I'm kind of getting at here is this is a way to use two of those different implementation styles that I just mentioned as part of your migration process without having to do a lot of extra work. You're able to help you with your migration to S4, and then after that migration, you then have an MDM platform as part of your business after go live without having to do much extra work.
Okay, so you mentioned that a clean master data is fundamental need before a transformation starts, but when might you change the implementation pattern once this is done? Could you talk a bit more about this?
Yeah, so this is kind of what I was trying to get at a little bit.
Yeah.
So visually, you have what the last slide just was is this top section, this slide, right? So number one, you do that data conversion. You have one or multiple ECC systems that you want to consolidate. You want to get all that data together so that when you do, so then when you push it to S4, it's in a good state, right? After you go live with S4, then a lot of times I see within these SAP these organizations that use a lot of SAP systems are really heavy in ECC and S4. They like to go about the centralized use case to implement an MDM platform to help maintain those downstream SAP systems. Now we can switch the interfaces that we create with those SAP systems. So then now you're using an MDM platform to then maintain all those data and keep the data consistent between your new S4 system and your legacy ECC system or systems. One thing to mention is this diagram here might be a little different depending if you go, a brownfield approach versus a greenfield approach with the S4 implementation, whether you're doing maybe an upgrade of your existing system or implementing a new greenfield system. So that's something else to keep in mind and when you're thinking through this as well.
And Kevin, I would add that for those early adopters of S4HANA, they invariably share that data quality is one of the biggest challenges they have as part of their S4 migration. And our experience is that if you do address your data management needs before you do the S4 migration, that can actually help tremendously reduce your migration implementation efforts, sometimes in the order of 20 to 40%.
Okay, so thanks guys for such detailed answers. If I move on now, I can imagine my next question might actually be top of mind for several people. In many organizations, there may be existing MDM solutions already, and an S4HANA migration might be a time to review the existing capabilities of their master data management. Is there a case here for multiple master data management solutions? Pedro, perhaps you could carry on, and as you're probably best positioned to tackle this one.
First off, I think it's important to point out that you're totally right. When a company undergoes an S4HANA implementation program, because of their scope being so broad, that's a unique opportunity for a company to reshape and revisit how their digital ecosystem is set up, how their business processes are functioning. And I've seen companies doing different things in this situation. We've dealt with many customers who took the opportunity to implement SAP MDG in a centralized implementation style that Kevin was talking about earlier. And in this case, where you have a customer where their ecosystem is very homogeneous, where it's essentially SAP based, it makes a lot of sense for MDG with its easy connectivity to the various SAP solutions to become that centralized master data management solution. In many other customers, however, we have which have a more diverse technology ecosystem, which may combine SAP and non-SAP technologies, for example, in CRM, in big data and analytics. We often see customers doing one of two things. They either, on one hand, implement the best of breed MDM solution to manage all their data, as you can see there on the left, whether that's SAP data, whether that's non-SAP data. They may leverage MDG optionally for the governance of the SAP specific data as almost like an application management solution for SAP, or they can actually leverage MDG for managing the SAP data and the best of breed solution for managing non-SAP data, and then consolidate all the data in one place, making it available to all the downstream systems. And I have seen both options working successfully.
Okay, thanks, Pedro. Some great insight there. I think probably now it would be really great to hear of your experiences of some of the tangible benefits you've seen customers achieve when leveraging a best of breed master data management solution. Pedro, perhaps you could carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, sure, Ian. There are several benefits, but I would like to point out two, which are for me very important. The first one, which is very relevant for many industries, is the reduction of time to market. Often when the data is of poor quality, this is one of the most common hurdles to delay your time to market. And our experience working with TIBCO in various industries, from consumer goods to pharmaceutical. If you have a successful implementation of a master data management strategy, this can actually reduce your time to market in 20 to 40%. Maybe the second benefit I'd like to bring up is around the enablement of a successful analytics strategy. In my 20 years experience in managing analytics programs, data quality, having that single accurate golden record for your customer, for your product, that's been the #1 challenge in the organization's ability to trust your analytics. And it has been critical, in fact, for the success of many of these initiatives. More often than not, because of this, people end up spending more time cleaning the data rather than actually analyzing it. So having a successful data management strategy as a foundation to your enterprise analytics programs can, according to our experience, accelerate these programs by at least 20 to 30%.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you again, Pedro. So perhaps to bring this discussion to a close, from your perspectives, you will no doubt have worked and seen organizations that have been very successful in their master data management implementations, and others that may have struggled. Could you make some comments on what you see as common attributes that you see for success?
Yes, that's a great point. And it's a little cliche to use the terms, the people, process, technology, but it really goes back to that. So I'm going to start with the process. Whenever you implement a new MDM platform or upgrading to S4, it's important to rethink your process. Do we want to try to move to less complex processes, more standardized best practice processes, SAP processes, right? Or do we need to keep these complex processes that are really providing more efficiency to our business and helping us, actually be quicker at our jobs and things like that? So whenever we have to rethink these processes and look at them again, we need to make sure that the technology that we choose is best adapted to them. If there's really a lot of complexity, then we need to make sure that there's a solution that's very flexible to be able to support that complexity. If we're going to a more standardized approach, then maybe it makes more sense to have other solutions that will support that easier than some other solutions. Lastly, the people, right? So there's lots of people out there, lots of consultants, lots of different professional services groups throughout the world that are professionals and experienced within SAP, and it's important to leverage these different resources instead of starting from scratch and going about the unknowns. It's important to look at what people have already done, the lessons learned that they've identified, and different issues that have come about these projects, so that when you go about it, you're more planned into the expectations of your project.
I'll even add to that point, Kevin, in terms of the organizational sponsorship, especially when it's top-down sponsorship from the people in your organization. That's often very critical to the success of a data management program. And of course, I'll even add the technology. Of course, the technology is an enabler. It doesn't guarantee success, but it's a very important element. And as it was clear from Kevin's comments, obviously a technology selection alone will not ensure the success of your data management strategy. But on the other hand, an incorrect technology can very much hinder your implementation. In today's fast-changing world, it's important that the technology behind a company's data management strategy is very flexible. It needs to enable the easy integration of new data sources, internal, external. It needs to be able to easily change your data models and data workflows to adapt to your company's fast-changing reality. And essentially, it needs to make your enterprise master data easily accessible and reusable to those who need it.
Fantastic. And that actually brings us to a close on this session. It leaves me to say thank you so much to Pedro from Apgar and Kevin from TIBCO for your insights. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen. We hope you found this session of value. To find out more, please visit the TIBCO Vendor Showcase page at sapinsider.org, or you can visit the SAP Migration Solutions page at tibco.com. So thank you from me, and
thank you guys.
Thank you very much.